The phone buzzed against the bathroom tile like an angry wasp, and that's when my perfect marriage started unraveling. I'm Troy Renwick, 38 years old, owner of Renwick's Fitness on Maple Street in Millbrook Heights. Not exactly the kind of guy you'd expect to find in this upscale suburban neighborhood, but my wife Isla comes from money, old money, the kind that builds lake houses and country club memberships while looking down on guys who actually work for a living. This particular Tuesday morning started like any other. Isla was in the shower, singing some pop song off-key, steam billowing under the bathroom door. I was making coffee in our granite countertop kitchen when I heard that buzzing sound. At first I thought it was my phone, but mine was charging on the counter beside me. The sound came again, persistent, annoying. I followed it to the master bathroom, where steam had fogged every mirror. There, wedged between the vanity and the wall, was a phone I'd never seen before. Small, cheap, basic. The kind you buy with cash at a gas station. My stomach twisted into a knot. The screen showed 3 missed calls from D and a string of unread messages. My hands shook as I picked it up, knowing I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. But something cold and calculating had already taken over my brain. The shower was still running. Isla's voice echoed off the tile walls, completely oblivious. I opened the messages. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about your hands on me. When can we meet at the lake again? I need you. Zoya said she'll cover for you this weekend. God, I love your mother. 18 months and I still can't get enough of you. You're everything Derek never was. Derek. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Derek Halden, Isla's childhood sweetheart from before we met. The guy who ran that fancy auto shop downtown. The one with the perfect smile and the Porsche. The one who was married to Lila, a sweet woman who baked cookies for every neighborhood gathering. I scrolled back through weeks of messages, months. The timestamps told a story that made my chest feel like it was caving in. 18 months, a year and a half of lies, of girls' weekends and spa trips with her mother. Her mother knew. Zoya Halden, the woman who'd never thought I was good enough for her precious daughter, had been helping orchestrate this betrayal. The water shut off. I quickly photographed every message, my gym-trained fingers surprisingly steady as I worked. Years of lifting weights had given me the kind of focus you need when everything depends on not dropping the bar. This was no different. Troy? Could you grab my robe? Isla's voice called through the door. Sure, honey, I managed, slipping the burner phone back into its hiding spot. I handed her the terry cloth robe through a crack in the door, studying her face for any sign of guilt. Nothing. Just that same entitled smile she'd worn since the day we met at Porter's 60th birthday party 7 years ago. You're up early, she said, toweling her blonde hair. Everything okay? Just couldn't sleep, I said. Thought I'd get a head start on inventory at the gym. She kissed my cheek, her skin still warm from the shower. You work too hard. Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway soon. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Maybe, I said. Where were you thinking? Oh, I don't know. Somewhere relaxing. Maybe the lake house? Mom's always saying we don't visit enough. I nodded, forcing a smile. Sounds perfect. She disappeared into her walk-in closet, and I stood there in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd built together. The king-size bed with its expensive Egyptian cotton sheets, the framed photos from our wedding day, the his and hers dressers that cost more than most people's cars. All of it felt like a lie now. My phone rang, snapping me back to reality. The caller ID showed Miranda Chen, my gym manager. Morning, boss, she said. Just wanted to confirm your 10 o'clock with the Hendersons. They're looking at the family package. Actually, cancel everything today, I said, walking into my home office and closing the door. Something came up. Everything all right? You sound weird. Miranda had worked for me for 3 years. She knew me well enough to pick up on things. Just need to handle some personal business, I said. Can you manage things solo today? Of course. But Troy, if something's wrong, I'll call you later. I hung up and sat behind my desk, staring at the photos on my phone. Evidence of an 18-month affair with my wife's childhood sweetheart, enabled by her own mother. The smart thing would have been to call a lawyer immediately, document everything, file for divorce, and take half of whatever assets weren't tied up in her trust fund. But I wasn't feeling particularly smart. I was feeling something much colder and more calculating. Isla came into the office wearing her usual work outfit, designer blouse, pencil skirt, heels that cost more than some people's rent. She worked for a high-end public relations firm downtown, spinning stories for wealthy clients who needed their images polished. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'll be late tonight, she said, checking her reflection in the window. Client dinner. Which client? I asked casually. The Riverside Development Group. Boring stuff, but they pay well. Another lie. I'd bet money she'd be at Derek's apartment above his shop, or maybe back at the lake house for another romantic evening while her mother provided cover. Have fun, I said. She kissed the top of my head and left, her heels clicking across the hardwood floors. A few minutes later, I heard her BMW pull out of the driveway. I sat there for a long time, thinking about the woman I'd married. Isla Corvin had been the most beautiful girl at every party, the one who could light up a room just by walking into it. Her family had money going back generations. Her great-grandfather had owned half the mills in the county before selling out to larger corporations. I'd been the outsider. The gym owner who'd played football at state before a knee injury ended any professional dreams. Not exactly what the Corvans had in mind for their daughter. But Isla had chosen me, or so I'd thought. We'd had a fairy tale wedding at the country club, honeymoon in Europe, bought this house in the best neighborhood in town. For 7 years, I'd believed we were happy. Now, I knew better. The question was what to do about it. I could confront her directly, but that would just lead to denials, tears, and promises to change. I could hire a private investigator, but I already had enough evidence to bury her in any divorce proceeding. Or I could do something else entirely. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it might be from Derek, but it was from Callum Torvin, Isla's younger brother. Hey Troy, you free for a drink tonight? Been too long. Callum was a lawyer who worked downtown. Unlike his sister, he'd never treated me like hired help. We'd always gotten along well, though we rarely socialized outside of family gatherings. The timing felt significant. Sure, I texted back. Murphy's Tavern at 8? Perfect. See you there. I spent the rest of the day at the gym, going through the motions of running my business, while my mind churned through possibilities. Miranda kept giving me concerned looks, but I brushed off her questions. Around 6, I drove home to shower and change. Isla's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was probably already with Derek, spinning whatever story they'd concocted for tonight's lie. Murphy's Tavern was the kind of blue-collar bar that didn't exist in our neighborhood. Callum had chosen it deliberately, somewhere we wouldn't run into anyone from Isla's social circle. He was already there when I arrived, nursing a whiskey at a corner booth. Callum looked like a younger, leaner version of his father Porter, sharp features, intelligent eyes, the kind of quiet intensity that made him effective in court. Thanks for coming, he said, as I slid into the booth across from him. I ordered a beer and studied his face. Something on your mind? Callum took a long sip of his whiskey before answering. How well do you know my sister, Troy? The question hit like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? I mean really know her. Not the version she shows at family dinners or country club events. The real Isla. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into dark water. Why don't you tell me what you think I should know? Callum leaned forward, lowering his voice. I've been hearing things, rumors, about Isla and Derek Halden. There it was, out in the open. What kind of rumors? I asked, though my heart was already pounding. The kind that make me ashamed to share her last name, Callum said. How long have you known? The direct question caught me off guard. I'd expected to have to pry information out of him, not the other way around. Since this morning, I admitted. Found her burner phone. Callum nodded grimly. I was hoping I was wrong. But I've seen them together, at restaurants across town, thinking nobody would notice. And Mom, he shook his head. Mom's been covering for her. For how long? At least a year, maybe longer. Callum finished his whiskey and signaled for another. The lake house weekends, the spa trips, the girls' nights out, all lies. We sat in silence for a moment, two men whose lives had been turned upside down by the same woman's selfishness. What are you going to do? Callum asked. I'd been asking myself the same question all day. I don't know yet. Well, when you figure it out, let me know if you need help. Isla's not the only one in our family who knows how to keep secrets. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back before sliding it across the table. That's my direct number. Call me anytime, day or night. I pocketed the card and looked at him carefully. Why are you helping me? Because you're a good man, Troy. You've been good to our family, even when we didn't deserve it. And because... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Because it's time someone held Isla accountable for her actions. We finished our drinks in relative silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we prepared to leave, Callum grabbed my arm. One more thing, he said. If you're thinking about confronting Dad, be careful how you approach it. He's old-school Catholic, military background, this kind of thing. He shook his head. It won't go well for Isla. I drove home slowly, thinking about what Callum had said. Porter Kellor was indeed old school, a retired Marine who'd built his construction company from nothing, married into the Corvin family, and spent 41 years being a devoted husband and father. He was also the kind of man who believed in consequences. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't confront Isla directly. I wouldn't hire lawyers or private investigators. I was going to tell her father first. Porter Kellor's house sat on 5 acres of perfectly manicured lawn, a testament to military precision and old-fashioned pride. The colonial-style home had been built in the 1960s, back when Porter's construction company was landing every major contract in the county. I'd been here dozens of times for family gatherings, but never alone. Never with the kind of news that could shatter a family. It was Thursday evening, 2 days after my conversation with Callum. I'd spent the intervening time documenting everything, photographing messages, researching Derek's business, even driving past his shop to confirm Isla's car was there during her supposed client meetings. The evidence was overwhelming. Now it was time to use it. Porter answered the door wearing his usual after-work uniform, khaki pants, white polo shirt, leather slippers. At 68, he still carried himself like the Marine he'd been 50 years ago. Troy, he said, surprise evident in his voice. Isla didn't mention you were coming by. She doesn't know I'm here, I said. I was hoping we could talk. Man to man. Something in my tone must have alerted him because his expression shifted from surprise to concern. Come in. Zoya's at her book club, so we won't be disturbed. He led me to his study, a room that perfectly captured the man who occupied it. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, military memorabilia on the walls, a purple heart in a frame on his desk, earned in Vietnam before most people in town were born. Porter poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter and handed me one. You look like you need this. I took a sip, feeling the burn slide down my throat. Porter, what I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear. He settled into his leather chair, fixing me with the kind of steady gaze that had probably intimidated enemy soldiers decades ago. Go ahead. I pulled out my phone and showed him the first photograph, Derek's message about meeting at the lake house. Porter's face didn't change as he read, but I saw his knuckles whiten around his whiskey glass. "There's more," I said, swiping to the next image. For the next 10 minutes, I walked him through 18 months of evidence. Messages about secret meetings, references to Zoya providing alibis, intimate details that left no doubt about what was happening. Porter said nothing during my presentation, but I watched his jaw clench tighter with each revelation. When I finished, he set down his glass and stared at the purple heart on his desk. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly. "2 days. And you came to me first." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, sir." Porter stood and walked to the window overlooking his backyard. In the fading light, I could see the lake house in the distance, connected to the main property by a winding path through the woods. "That lake house," he said without turning around. "I built it with my own hands 30 years ago. Thought it would be a place where my grandchildren would learn to fish, where the family would gather for holidays." He turned to face me, and I saw something I'd never seen in Porter Kellor's eyes before: shame. "Instead, it's been a place for my daughter to betray her husband and my wife, to betray everything we've built together." The weight of that statement settled between us. This wasn't just about Isla's affair. It was about Zoya's complicity, about trust broken at every level of the family. "What do you want from me, Troy?" "I want your support when this all comes out," I said. "I want you to know that I tried to make this marriage work, that I was faithful and honest, and did everything I could to be the husband Isla deserved." Porter nodded slowly. "You have it. But I suspect you want something else too." He was right. I wanted more than just moral support. "Isla's always counted on having her family's backing," I said carefully. "Financial and otherwise. She's never faced real consequences for her actions because she's always known you and Zoya would be there to catch her." "And you think it's time that changed?" "I think it's time she learned that actions have consequences." Porter walked to his desk and pulled out a leather-bound address book, the kind men of his generation still used instead of smartphones. He flipped through it until he found what he was looking for. "Harold Morrison," he said, picking up his landline phone. "He's been our family lawyer for 25 years. "Porter, you don't have to—" He held up a hand to silence me and dialed the number. "Harold, it's Porter Kellor. I need you to come to the house tomorrow morning. We need to make some changes to the will." My heart started pounding. I'd hoped for Porter's support, but I hadn't expected this. "Yes, major changes," Porter continued. "And Harold, this stays between us until everything's finalized." He hung up and looked at me with grim satisfaction. "Isla's inheritance is currently set at $2.3 million, plus a share of the lake property. As of tomorrow, that changes." "Porter, I don't want your money. This isn't about you, son. This is about consequences." Isla made her choice when she decided to dishonor her marriage vows and involve her mother in the deception. Now she gets to live with the results. He picked up his whiskey glass and drained it in one swallow. "There's something else," he said. "Zoya's been using our joint accounts to pay for Isla's lies, hotel rooms, restaurant bills, even helped Derek lease that apartment above his shop. She thought I wouldn't notice, but I review every bank statement." The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy involving multiple family members and lasting over a year. "What about Zoya?" I asked. Porter's expression hardened. "What about her? She made her choice when she decided to help our daughter destroy her marriage. She can live with the consequences too." We talked for another hour, Porter sharing details about the family finances that painted an even uglier picture. Zoya had been systematically enabling Isla's affair, using family money to fund romantic getaways and cover stories. As I prepared to leave, Porter walked me to the door. "Troy," he said, "I want you to know that you've been a better son-in-law than I deserved. You've treated our family with respect, even when we didn't return it. Thank you, sir. When this all comes out, and it will come out, remember that you have allies. Callum's already on your side, and now so am I. I drove home with my head spinning. In the span of one conversation, I'd gained a powerful ally and set in motion events that would reshape the entire family dynamic. Isla was home when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of wine and her laptop open. "How was your day?" she asked, without looking up. "Productive," I said. "How was the client dinner?" "Boring but necessary. The Riverside people want to completely rebrand their image before the next development phase." Another lie delivered with practiced ease. I'd driven past Derek's shop on my way to Porter's house. Her BMW had been parked in the back lot. "I'm going to take a shower," I said. "Okay, I'll probably be up late working on this proposal." I left her in the kitchen and went upstairs, marveling at how normal everything seemed on the surface. We were like actors playing the roles of a happy married couple, each keeping our own secrets. But tomorrow, the performance would begin to unravel. I lay in bed that night listening to Isla type on her laptop downstairs, probably crafting more lies for her double life. In less than 12 hours, Porter would be rewriting his will, cutting her off from the financial safety net she'd always taken for granted. It was just the beginning. Harold Morrison arrived at Porter's house at exactly 9 o'clock Friday morning, carrying a leather briefcase that had probably seen decades of family legal business. I watched from my gym office as his Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway, knowing that in a few hours, Isla's world would begin collapsing. I'd spent the morning going through the motions of normal life, opening the gym, greeting members, pretending to care about workout routines and membership renewals. But my mind was entirely focused on what was happening 5 miles away. Miranda noticed my distraction immediately. "Boss, you've been weird all week," she said, cornering me in the office around 10:30. "What's going on?" Miranda was 26, sharp as a knife, and had an uncanny ability to read people. She'd grown up in Millbrook Heights, which meant she knew all the local families and their histories. "Just some personal stuff," I said, trying to sound casual. "Personal stuff involving your wife?" The question caught me off guard. "What makes you say that?" Miranda perched on the edge of my desk, lowering her voice. "Because I saw her car at Derek Halden's shop again yesterday, 3rd time this month." My stomach dropped. If Miranda had noticed, how many other people had put the pieces together? "Maybe she was getting work done on her car," I said weakly. "Troy." Miranda's voice was gentle but firm. "Derek Halden doesn't work on BMWs. He specializes in classic cars and high-end restorations, and his shop's been closed for renovations all week." The lie crumbled in my hands. If Derek's shop was closed, then Isla had been meeting him at his apartment above it. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Suspected for about 2 months. Knew for sure when I saw them together at Romano's last week. They weren't exactly being discreet." Romano's was an upscale Italian restaurant on the other side of town, the kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be seen by their usual social circle. "Who else knows?" Miranda shrugged. "Hard to say. You know how this town is. People talk, but not always to the right people. But Troy, if I've noticed, others have too." My phone rang before I could respond. Porter's name appeared on the screen. "Excuse me," I told Miranda, stepping into the back office. "It's done," Porter said without preamble. "Harold just left. The new will is signed and witnessed." "What exactly did you change?" "Isla's inheritance is now $1. Symbolic, but legal. The bulk of her portion goes to Callum and any future grandchildren. The lake house property is divided between Callum and a conservation trust." The finality of it was staggering. With a few signatures, Porter had essentially disinherited his daughter. "There's more," Porter continued. "I've instructed Harold to begin separation proceedings from Zoya. 41 years of marriage, and she threw it away to help our daughter have an affair. Porter, are you sure about this? Once word gets out, I'm sure, and word's going to get out sooner than you think. I'm telling Isla and Zoya tonight at dinner, family meeting at 6 o'clock. My heart started racing. Do you want me there? I want you to bring the divorce papers. Harold's preparing them now. They'll be ready by 5. Isla can receive both pieces of news at the same time. The plan was brutal in its efficiency. Isla would learn about her disinheritance and divorce simultaneously, in front of her entire family. What about Callum? He'll be there. This affects him too, since he's now the primary beneficiary. After Porter hung up, I sat in my office trying to process what was about to happen. In a few hours, I would be serving my wife with divorce papers in front of her parents and brother, while her father simultaneously announced that he was cutting her off financially and separating from her mother. It felt like dropping a nuclear bomb on the family. Miranda knocked on the office door. Everything okay? Can you handle things here for the rest of the day? I asked. I need to take care of some personal business. Of course. But Troy, whatever's happening, be careful. When people's lives fall apart, they don't always react rationally. Her warning proved prophetic. I spent the afternoon at Harold Morrison's law office reviewing divorce papers and discussing strategy. Harold was a thin, precise man who'd been handling family legal matters since before I was born. This is going to be messy, he warned as I signed the documents. When someone loses both their marriage and their inheritance on the same day, they tend to lash out. Isla's not violent, I said. Maybe not physically, but she has other weapons: social connections, family relationships, public reputation. She'll use whatever she can to fight back. At 5:30, I drove to Porter's house with the divorce papers in my jacket pocket. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding like I'd just finished a marathon. Callum's car was already in the driveway, along with Zoya's white Cadillac. Through the dining room windows, I could see the family gathered around the mahogany table that had hosted decades of holiday meals and birthday celebrations. Porter met me at the door, his face grim but resolute. You ready for this? He asked. No, I admitted, but let's do it anyway. The dining room felt like a courtroom as I walked in. Isla sat at one end of the table, elegant in a blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Zoya was across from her, nervously fidgeting with her wedding ring. Callum occupied the chair closest to his father's seat at the head of the table. Troy, Isla said, surprise evident in her voice. I didn't know you were joining us. I asked him to be here, Porter said, taking his seat. We have family business to discuss. The next few minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed play. Porter began by addressing Zoya, his voice cold and formal. 41 years ago, I married a woman I thought shared my values. Someone I could trust with my life, my business, my family's future. Zoya's face went pale. Porter, what's this about? It's about the fact that you've been using our joint accounts to fund our daughter's affair. Hotel rooms, restaurant bills, even helping her lover lease an apartment. The words hit the table like physical blows. Isla's mouth opened and closed without sound. Zoya started to cry. I have bank records, Porter continued. 18 months of payments that I initially assumed were legitimate expenses. Until Troy showed me the truth. All eyes turned to me. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, the screen showing one of Derek's messages. I found Isla's burner phone Tuesday morning, I said. Everything's documented. Isla's composure finally cracked. You went through my private messages? Your private messages with another man, I replied. Messages that reference meetings at this family's lake house with your mother's knowledge and assistance. Isla, Porter said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Is this true? For a moment, I thought she might try to deny everything, but the evidence was too overwhelming, the betrayal too complete. Yes, she whispered. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Zoya's crying intensified. Callum stared at his sister with a mixture of disgust and pity. Porter reached into his jacket and pulled out a legal document. "As of this morning, you are no longer a beneficiary of my will," he said, sliding the papers across the table to Isla. "Your inheritance has been redistributed to Callum and any future grandchildren." Isla's face went white as she read the document. "You can't do this." "I can, and I have. Harold Morrison witnessed the signing this morning." "What about Mom?" Isla asked desperately. "Your mother and I are separating. She'll receive what the law requires, but our marriage is over." Zoya let out a sound that was part sob, part wail. "Porter, please. I was trying to help our daughter." "You were helping her destroy her marriage and dishonor our family name." That's when I pulled out the divorce papers. "Isla," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "you're being served with divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery with full documentation of your affair." She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Troy, we can work this out. We can go to counseling." 18 months, I said. "You've been lying to me for 18 months. There's nothing to work out." The explosion, when it came, was spectacular. Isla shot to her feet, her chair falling backward. "This is insane. You can't all just gang up on me like this." "We're not ganging up," Callum said quietly. "We're holding you accountable." "You!" Isla whirled on her brother. "You knew, didn't you? You've been planning this." "I suspected." Troy confirmed it. Isla turned to her mother, desperation replacing anger. "Mom, tell them. Tell them how Derek and I never meant for this to happen, how we tried to stay away from each other." "Isla, stop," Zoya pleaded. "No, they need to understand. Derek and I have history. We were together before I met Troy. We never stopped loving each other." "That's enough," Porter said, standing up. His voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to command. "You made your choice, Isla. Now you live with the consequences." Isla looked around the table at her family, her father's disappointment, her mother's tears, her brother's disgust, my cold satisfaction. "You're all going to regret this," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "when people find out what you've done to me." "What we've done?" I interrupted. "Isla, you've been having an affair for 18 months. Your mother helped you do it. The only thing we've done is stop enabling your lies." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back one last time. "This isn't over," she said. But as I watched her storm out of the house that had sheltered her for 35 years, I knew it was. The family she'd counted on to always catch her when she fell had finally let her hit the ground, and she had no one to blame but herself. The phone calls started at 6:30 Saturday morning. I'd spent Friday night at a hotel downtown, not ready to face whatever destruction Isla might have wreaked at our house after the family meeting. Smart choice, as it turned out. Miranda texted me around midnight that she'd driven past our neighborhood and seen Isla's BMW in the driveway with Derek's Porsche parked behind it. The first call was from Nate Kolb, my best friend since high school and head bouncer at Murphy's Tavern. "Dude, what the hell is happening?" he said without preamble. "Half the town's talking about some kind of family war between you and the Corvins." "Word travels fast," I said, sitting up in the hotel bed. "Lila Halden was at Murphy's last night, 3 sheets to the wind, telling anyone who'd listen that her husband's been screwing your wife. Said she's filing for divorce and taking Derek for everything he's worth." So Lila knew now. That meant Derek's marriage was probably over too. "How much does she know?" I asked. "Everything, from the sound of it. She found hotel receipts, credit card charges, the whole 9 yards. Apparently Derek wasn't as careful as he thought." The second call came from Miranda. "Boss, we have a problem," she said. "Isla showed up at the gym an hour ago, demanding to see you. When I told her you weren't here, she started screaming at members, saying you'd turned her whole family against her." "Is she still there?" "No, I threatened to call the cops and she left. But Troy, she looked unhinged. like she hadn't slept all night. The third call was from Callum. "Dad wants to see you," he said. "Can you come by the house around 10? "How's he doing?" "Better than Mom. She locked herself in the guest bedroom and won't come out. Dad's been in his study all morning making phone calls." I checked out of the hotel and drove to Porter's house, wondering what fresh developments awaited me. The circular driveway was empty except for Porter's pickup truck. Zoya's Cadillac was nowhere to be seen. Porter answered the door looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight, but his eyes were clear and determined. "Come in," he said. "We need to talk about damage control." His study felt different in the morning light, less like a sanctuary and more like a war room. Legal documents covered his desk, and his phone showed a dozen missed calls. "Zoya left around 4 this morning," he said without preamble. "Took a suitcase and her jewelry box. I assume she's at her sister's house in Springfield." "I'm sorry, Porter." He waved off my sympathy. 41 years of marriage, and she chose to protect Isla's affair instead of our relationship. That tells me everything I need to know about who she really is. He poured coffee from a thermal carafe and handed me a mug. "I've been making calls since dawn," he continued. "The country club, the church board, the hospital foundation, every organization where our family has influence. Getting ahead of the story before Isla can spin her version." "What are you telling them?" "The truth. That my daughter violated her marriage vows and my wife helped her do it. That I'm divorcing Zoya and disinheriting Isla because actions have consequences." The bluntness was staggering, but I understood the strategy. In a small town like Millbrook Heights, controlling the narrative was everything. How are people responding? Porter's smile was grim. Mixed reactions. The older generation understands. They remember when adultery actually meant something. The younger crowd seems to think I'm being too harsh. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Derek. We need to talk." I showed the message to Porter, who snorted with disgust. "What do you think he wants?" I asked. "Probably to negotiate some kind of truce. Men like Derek always think they can talk their way out of consequences." I typed back, "Nothing to discuss." The response came immediately. "Please, 5 minutes. My whole life is falling apart." "Good," I said aloud, showing Porter the exchange. "Block his number," Porter advised. "Don't give him the satisfaction of thinking his problems matter to you." Around noon, Callum arrived with news from downtown. "Derek's shop is closed," he reported. "Sign on the door says temporarily shut down for renovations, but his landlord told me Derek missed this month's rent payment." "What about Lila?" "Filed for divorce yesterday afternoon. She's asking for everything. The house, his business assets, even his precious car collection." The speed of Derek's collapse was almost impressive. In less than 24 hours, he'd lost his wife, his business, and probably his financial security. "There's more," Callum continued. "I heard from a friend at the courthouse that Isla tried to file a restraining order against you this morning." "On what grounds?" "Harassment and invasion of privacy. The judge threw it out when she couldn't provide any evidence of actual harassment, so Isla was fighting back, trying to use the legal system to regain some control. It wouldn't work. I had too much documentation of her affair, and her own actions had destroyed any sympathy she might have garnered." My phone rang. This time it was Harold Morrison. "Troy, we have a problem," the lawyer said. "Isla's hired representation. Marcus Brennan from Springfield." I knew the name. Brennan was a high-priced divorce attorney who specialized in representing wealthy spouses in contentious splits. "What does that mean for us?" "It means she's going to fight the divorce and probably challenge her father's will. Brennan's good at dragging things out, making them expensive and public." "Can he win?" "Not with the evidence you have, but he can make the process painful for everyone involved." After Harold hung up, I sat in Porter's study considering my options. Isla was escalating the conflict, bringing in professional help, and preparing for a prolonged battle. Maybe it was time to escalate too. Porter, I said, how would you feel about making this whole thing very public? His eyebrows rose. What do you have in mind? The hospital charity gala is next Friday night. Half the town will be there, including most of Isla's social circle. And I think it's time everyone knew exactly what kind of person they've been socializing with. Porter's smile was sharp as a blade. I like the way you think, son. We spent the next hour planning what would become known as the most dramatic charity gala in Millbrook Heights history. By the time I left Porter's house, I felt like a general preparing for battle. Isla wanted to fight dirty. She was about to learn that she wasn't the only one who knew how to manipulate a social situation. The war was just beginning, and I intended to win it. The Millbrook Heights Hospital Charity Gala was the social event of the fall season, held annually in the ballroom of the Grand Riverside Hotel. 500 of the town's most influential residents would gather to write checks, network, and gossip while pretending to care about medical equipment upgrades. I'd attended 3 times with Isla, watching her work the room like a professional politician, charming donors and maintaining the family's social standing. She was brilliant at it, the perfect combination of beauty, intelligence, and practiced charm that made people want to be in her orbit. Tonight, those same skills would work against her. I arrived at 7:30, 15 minutes after the cocktail hour began. Porter and Callum were already there, positioned strategically near the main entrance where they could greet arriving guests. Porter wore his dress military uniform, something he only did for the most formal occasions, while Callum looked sharp in a tailored black suit. The message was clear. The Kellor men were united and ready for battle. Isla hadn't arrived yet, but her absence was already generating whispers. In a town like Millbrook Heights, people noticed when prominent families showed cracks in their facade. Troy, Margaret Hensley, the hospital board president, approached with a concerned expression. How are you holding up, dear? I heard there's been some difficulty in your family. The euphemism was classic small-town diplomacy. Margaret knew exactly what was happening, probably had for weeks, but would never be so crass as to mention adultery directly. I'm managing, I said. Sometimes these things are for the best. Of course. And Porter looks so distinguished tonight. Military dress suits him. She moved on to other conversations, but I caught her glancing back at me with curious eyes. The gossip network was already processing tonight's developments. Derek Halden was notably absent. According to Nate, who'd been monitoring the situation from his perch at Murphy's Tavern, Derek had left town 2 days ago, supposedly visiting family in Chicago. More likely, he was hiding until the immediate storm passed. At 8:15, Isla made her entrance. She looked stunning, as always. Black evening gown, diamond earrings that had been her grandmother's, hair swept up in an elegant chignon. But there were subtle signs of strain if you knew where to look. Slightly too much makeup covering dark circles under her eyes, a tightness around her mouth that suggested sleepless nights. She was alone. No Derek, no supportive friends flanking her, no mother to provide moral support. Just Isla against the world, exactly as she'd chosen. I watched from across the room as she approached the bar, ordering what looked like a double vodka tonic. Several acquaintances greeted her with the kind of overly bright enthusiasm that meant they'd heard the rumors, but weren't sure how much was true. Porter moved first. He approached Isla near the silent auction tables, their conversation invisible to most observers, but clearly tense. I saw her face flush, saw her gesture sharply with her drink. Porter remained calm, speaking in low tones that forced her to lean in to hear him. Whatever he said made her step backward as if she'd been slapped. That's when I made my move. Isla, I said, appearing at her elbow with a fresh drink in my hand. You look lovely tonight. She turned to face me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Genuine fear, Troy, I wasn't sure you'd be here. Wouldn't miss it. This is such an important cause, don't you think? Supporting the hospital that serves our whole community? The words were innocuous, but my tone carried an edge that made nearby conversations pause. People were starting to pay attention. Of course, she said carefully. I was just telling the Richardsons about your recent interest in automotive restoration, I continued, referencing the elderly couple who owned the largest car dealership in town. How you've been spending so much time at Derek Halden's shop, learning about classic car maintenance. Isla's face went white. The Richardsons looked confused. They knew Derek's shop had been closed for weeks. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Isla said quickly. Oh, I don't think so. You've always been so passionate about hands-on learning. The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. A small circle of listeners had formed, drawn by the obvious tension between us. Troy, perhaps we should discuss this privately, Isla said, her voice tight with desperation. Why? We're among friends here, people who care about our family. I turned to address the growing audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll indulge me for just a moment. As many of you know, Isla and I are going through some changes in our relationship. The room was growing quieter, conversations tapering off as people sensed drama unfolding. It's always difficult when you discover that someone you trust has been living a double life, when they've been using family resources, family properties, to conduct affairs behind your back. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Isla grabbed my arm, her nails digging through my jacket. Stop, she hissed. Stop what? Telling the truth? Isn't that what we should all strive for? I gently removed her hand from my arm and continued addressing the room. Some of you may have wondered why Porter and Zoya Kellor aren't here together tonight. Why Zoya isn't here at all, actually. Porter had moved closer, his face grave but supportive. Callum flanked my other side, presenting a united front. The answer is simple. When a mother helps her daughter conduct an 18-month affair, using the family lake house as a meeting place, there are consequences. When a wife chooses to enable adultery instead of supporting her marriage, there are consequences. The silence was complete now. 500 people hanging on every word. Porter Kellor is a man of principles. Military service, 41 years of marriage, a lifetime of building this community. When he learned that his wife had been funding his daughter's affair, hotel rooms, restaurant bills, even helping the other man lease an apartment, he made the difficult but correct choice. Isla was crying now, mascara starting to run despite her waterproof makeup. He's divorcing Zoya and disinheriting Isla. Because actions have consequences, and integrity matters more than family loyalty when that loyalty enables betrayal. I turned back to Isla, my voice softening just enough to seem almost sympathetic. I know this is hard for you, losing your inheritance, your family's support, your social standing all at once. But you made these choices, 18 months of choices, documented in text messages and hotel receipts and bank records. You're destroying me, she whispered. No, Isla, you destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are. The crowd began to murmur, processing what they'd just witnessed. Some looked shocked, others satisfied. Small-town gossip rarely delivered such complete revelations. Margaret Hensley approached, her face a mask of professional concern. Perhaps we should let the evening continue, she suggested diplomatically. Of course, I agreed. I apologize for the disruption, but sometimes the truth needs to be spoken publicly. Isla fled toward the restrooms, probably to repair her makeup and figure out how to salvage the situation. But the damage was done. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Millbrook Heights would know exactly what had happened to the Kellor family. Porter clapped me on the shoulder as the crowd began to disperse. Well done, son, he said quietly. She needed to face the consequences of her actions. Think it was too harsh? I asked. No. She chose to make this public when she hired that lawyer and tried to fight the divorce. You just controlled the narrative before she could spin her version. As the evening progressed, I watched Isla attempt to work the room, trying to rebuild bridges that had just been burned. A few longtime family friends offered polite sympathy, but most people kept their distance. Her social currency had evaporated in the span of 10 minutes. Around 10 o'clock, she approached me one last time as I stood near the exit. "I hope you're satisfied," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'm satisfied that the truth is finally out," I replied. "The truth? The truth is that you never understood me, never gave me what I needed emotionally. Derek did. The truth is that you're a selfish, entitled woman who thought she could have everything without consequences. Tonight, you learned otherwise." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant when she realized that the man she'd married, the man she'd underestimated for 7 years, was not the same person standing before her now. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes, Isla, it is." I walked out of the hotel into the cool October night, leaving behind the wreckage of a marriage and a family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal proceedings, financial negotiations, the tedious process of untangling 7 years of shared life. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The truth was finally out, and everyone knew exactly who was responsible for the destruction. 3 weeks after the charity gala, Isla made her last desperate play. The divorce proceedings had been moving smoothly in my favor. Harold Morrison's documentation was airtight, and Marcus Brennan's attempts to discredit the evidence had failed spectacularly. Isla's inheritance challenge was going nowhere, Porter's will revision was legally bulletproof, and the separation between Porter and Zoya was proceeding without contest. Derek Halden had returned from Chicago only to find his auto shop lease terminated and his wife's divorce attorney seizing his assets. He'd moved into a cheap apartment across town and taken a job at a chain garage, his reputation in ruins. Everything was falling into place exactly as planned. That's when Isla decided to approach Callum. I learned about it from Callum himself, who called me at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, his voice shaking with disgust and rage. "Troy, I need to see you immediately. Come to my office, back entrance, and don't tell anyone you're coming." I found him in his downtown law office, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking like he hadn't slept. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, his tie loose, his hair uncombed. "What happened?" I asked. Instead of answering, he handed me his phone. The screen showed a voice recording app with a file labeled Isla, Monday night. "Play it," he said grimly. I pressed play and heard Isla's voice, slightly slurred with alcohol but unmistakably hers. "Callum, you have to help me. Dad's being completely unreasonable about the will, and Troy's being vindictive about the divorce. You're the only one who can fix this." Callum's voice responded, "Isla, you brought this on yourself. The affair, involving Mom, lying for 18 months. But you understand, don't you? You understand what it's like to need something that your family can't give you, to find that connection with someone who really gets you?" There was a pause. Then Callum again. "What are you talking about?" "I see how you look at me sometimes, how you've always looked at me. We have a connection, Callum. We always have." My stomach dropped. She wasn't suggesting what I thought she was suggesting. "Isla, you're drunk. I'm calling you a cab." "No, wait. Listen to me. If we were together, if you and I were a couple, Dad would have to change the will back. He couldn't disinherit his daughter if she was married to his son. It would keep the money in the family." The silence on the recording stretched for several seconds. "Are you suggesting that I divorce my wife and marry you? My own sister?" "We're not actually related by genetics. You know that. Your dad married my mom when we were teenagers. We're step-siblings, not real siblings." "Isla, this is insane." Is it? Think about it, Callum. You've never been happy with Jennifer. I know you haven't, and I can give you things she never could. I can give you the life you've always wanted. Stop talking. I'm serious. We could be together, really together. The money would stay in the family, Dad would have to accept it eventually, and we'd both get what we want. What I want is for you to leave my office and never speak of this again. Callum, please. I'm desperate here. I've lost everything. My husband, my inheritance, my mother, my social standing. You're the only one who can save me. By committing what amounts to incest? It's not incest if we're not genetically related. It's morally incest, Isla. We grew up as brother and sister. The fact that you would even suggest this tells me exactly how far you've fallen. The recording ended there. I stared at Callum, trying to process what I'd just heard. She actually propositioned you. She spent an hour in my office last night, trying to convince me to leave Jennifer and marry her so she could get her inheritance back. An hour, Troy. She had it all planned out. How we'd move to another state, how we'd present it to Dad as true love that transcended family boundaries. What did you do? I recorded the whole conversation and told her to get out. Then I called Jennifer and told her everything. How did Jennifer take it? Better than I expected. She's known Isla was selfish, but this... He shook his head. This is pathological. I sat in one of Callum's client chairs, trying to wrap my head around the depths of Isla's desperation. She'd been willing to seduce her own stepbrother to regain her inheritance. Are you going to tell Porter? I already did. Called him at 5 this morning. How did he react? He hung up on me, then called back 10 minutes later and said he was driving to Harold Morrison's office to add a codicil to the will, making sure Isla can never inherit anything under any circumstances, even if the original will is successfully challenged. The final nail in the coffin. Even if Isla somehow found a way to overturn Porter's disinheritance, the codicil would ensure she got nothing. There's more, Callum continued. I'm sending copies of this recording to Marcus Brennan and to the family court judge handling your divorce. This level of manipulation and moral bankruptcy needs to be on the record. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you and Callum are planning. This isn't over. I showed the message to Callum, who snorted with disgust. She's completely lost touch with reality. She thinks we're the ones planning something, when she's the one who just propositioned her stepbrother. What do you think she'll do next? Nothing effective. She's burned every bridge, exhausted every option. This was her last play, and it backfired spectacularly. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Harold Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Troy, we need to meet immediately. Marcus Brennan just called. He's withdrawing as Isla's attorney. Why? He won't say specifically, but he mentioned irreconcilable differences with his client's approach to the case. I suspect Callum's recording reached him faster than we expected. Within 2 hours, the news was spreading through Millbrook Heights' legal community. Isla Corvin Renwick had been dropped by her high-priced attorney under mysterious circumstances, leaving her to represent herself in both divorce and inheritance proceedings. By Thursday, she'd hired a public defender, a recent law school graduate who specialized in traffic tickets and small claims disputes. The contrast was stark. I had Harold Morrison, a seasoned family law expert with 40 years of experience, while Isla had a 26-year-old who'd never handled a complex divorce case. The final hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend at Porter's house, helping him prepare for what we all knew would be Isla's last stand. She'd requested permission to address the court directly, probably planning some kind of emotional appeal about family loyalty and forgiveness. Let her talk, Porter advised. The more she says, the worse she'll make it for herself. Sunday evening, as I sat in Porter's study reviewing documents one final time, my phone rang. Isla's name appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Porter said. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what her final gambit would be. Troy, she said, her voice small and defeated. "Can we talk? Please? We'll be talking Monday in court. I mean really talk. Just the two of us, like we used to." "We never really talked, Isla. You talked, I listened. There's a difference. I know I made mistakes. You made choices, 18 months of deliberate choices. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems, start over somewhere new." The delusion was breathtaking. Even now, facing complete social and financial ruin, she thought she could manipulate her way back into my life. "Isla, you propositioned your stepbrother 3 days ago. You asked him to leave his wife and marry you so you could get your inheritance back. There's no coming back from that." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. "You don't understand," she finally said. "I was desperate. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking very clearly. You calculated exactly what it would take to get what you wanted, and you were willing to destroy another marriage to make it happen. It's exactly what happened. Just like you calculated how to hide your affair for 18 months. Just like you calculated how to use your mother as an accomplice. You're not a victim, Isla, you're a predator." I hung up and turned off my phone. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, autumn giving way to the harsh reality of winter. I met Harold Morrison at the courthouse steps, both of us carrying briefcases full of documentation that would formally end my marriage and confirm Isla's disinheritance. Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty except for the required parties. Porter sat in the front row, his face stoic. Callum occupied the seat beside him. Zoya was notably absent. She'd moved to Springfield permanently, according to Porter, and wanted nothing to do with the final proceedings. Isla sat at the defendant's table with her young attorney, who looked overwhelmed by the complexity of the case. She'd dressed conservatively, navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a simple bun, trying to project respectability and remorse. Judge Patricia Hawthorne called the court to order and reviewed the case summary. Adultery, documented over 18 months. Inheritance dispute, complicated by the defendant's attempt to manipulate family members. Divorce petition with extensive financial documentation. "Mrs. Renwick," Judge Hawthorne said, "you've requested permission to address the court directly. You have 5 minutes." Isla stood, smoothing her skirt, and approached the podium. For a moment, she looked like the confident woman I'd married 7 years ago. "Your Honor, I stand before you today as someone who made terrible mistakes, but who is genuinely sorry for the pain I've caused." The words were carefully chosen, probably rehearsed, but her delivery lacked conviction. "I had an affair. I won't deny that, or try to excuse it. But I want the court to understand that my marriage had been struggling for years. My husband and I had grown apart, stopped communicating, stopped being intimate partners in any meaningful way." I felt Harold Morrison tense beside me, but he'd warned me this was coming. The blame shifting, the attempt to make our marriage problems seem mutual. Derek Halden was someone I'd known since childhood. When we reconnected, it felt natural, comfortable. I know that doesn't justify what I did, but I hope it explains it. She paused, glancing at me with what might have been genuine regret. "I also want to address the accusations about my family. Yes, my mother knew about my relationship with Derek, but she wasn't an active participant. She was a mother trying to protect her daughter from a marriage that was making her miserable." Another lie, contradicted by bank records and text messages that showed Zoya's active involvement in funding the affair. As for my father's decision to disinherit me, I understand his disappointment. But I hope that someday, when emotions have cooled, he'll remember that I'm still his daughter. That family should mean more than moral judgment. The final appeal, family loyalty over personal accountability. I'm asking this court not for forgiveness, but for fairness. Yes, I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to lose everything, my marriage, my family, my financial security, because of one relationship that went too far. She returned to her seat, and I saw her hands shaking slightly. Whatever else she was, Isla wasn't stupid. She had to know how weak her defense sounded. Judge Hawthorne reviewed the evidence one final time. Photos of text messages, bank records, witness statements, the recording of Isla's proposition to Callum. "Mrs. Renwick," the judge said finally, "adultery is grounds for divorce in this state, and the evidence presented is overwhelming. Your 18-month affair was documented, premeditated, and involved the use of family resources. Furthermore, your recent attempt to manipulate your stepbrother into a relationship for financial gain demonstrates a pattern of behavior that goes beyond simple marital infidelity." Isla's face crumpled. "I'm granting the divorce petition in favor of the plaintiff. Mrs. Renwick, you'll receive the minimum spousal support required by law, and no share of marital assets acquired during the period of your documented adultery." The gavel came down with finality. Outside the courthouse, Porter shook my hand with military precision. "It's over," he said simply. "What happens now?" "Now you rebuild your life, and Isla learns to live with the consequences of her choices." As we walked down the courthouse steps, I saw Isla standing by her car, alone. Her young attorney had already left, probably relieved to be done with such a complicated case. She looked up as we passed, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was no anger there anymore, no defiance. Just the hollow look of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. I felt no satisfaction in her defeat, no joy in her isolation, just a quiet sense that justice had been served and truth had prevailed. The war was over. I'd won not through violence or cruelty, but by simply refusing to enable her lies any longer. Sometimes the